I died. Jesus revealed shocking truth and religion's fate without Christ. The air in the sanctuary felt thick, not with worship, but with a strange, suffocating heat. Pastor Elias Thorne gripped the worn oak pulpit, his knuckles white. The spotlight, usually a warm glow, now felt harsh, exposing every doubt. He watched the faces below, a sea of expectant eyes, their quiet murmurs a low hum. Their collective hope was a heavy cloak he couldn't shed, a burden he carried, pretending it was light. His own voice, so practiced, so resonant, filled the sacred space. He spoke of salvation, of a love so profound it could heal any wound, but the words felt like dust on his tongue. They were empty. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down his temple, not from the heat, but from a growing dread. He could feel it, a tremor starting deep inside his chest. Not nerves, no. This was different. This was wrong. He glanced at the stained glass window depicting a serene Christ, but even that familiar image seemed distorted, its colors too vibrant, almost mocking him. His vision blurred for a split second. The polished pews swam into a distorted wave. He blinked hard, trying to clear it, but the tremor intensified. It became a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. He fought it. He tried to push through, but a coldness spread from his core, seizing him. The ornate cross above the altar, usually a beacon of peace, now seemed to mock him. Its gold shimmered with an alien light. He felt a sharp, sudden pain, like an iron fist clenching his very soul. The world tilted. The faces below gasped. A wave of worried murmurs rose, a rising tide of concern. He tried to speak, to offer reassurance, but his throat was locked, dry, but deep. Agonizing throb pulsed behind his eyes. He stumbled, one hand flying out to steady himself, grasping at empty air. The sermon notes, meticulously prepared, fluttering from the pulpit, scattered across the polished floor like fallen leaves. A gasp ripped through the congregation. He saw a flicker of genuine fear in the eyes of Mrs. Henderson, always in the third pew. Her usual smile was gone. The air grew impossibly cold, then impossibly hot, then nothing. A profound silence fell. A ringing, echoing silence. He felt himself falling, not down, but into something dark, something vast, something utterly unfamiliar. The last thing he registered was the stunned faces. They were frozen in disbelief, and the terrifying, undeniable feeling of his heart stopping. A final crushing beat. Then, in the absolute dark, a voice. It cut through everything. A voice he knew, yet didn't, and it spoke. "You have preached my name, Elias," it resonated, cutting through the void. "But your temple was empty. Your heart was cold. Your faith a performance. And it was all for nothing." Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I have an important warning for you. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has unsubscribed them without notice. Just give that red button below a quick check to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content coming up. And since you're there, smash that powerful like button. It helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. The words echoed, vibrating not just in Elias's very soul, but somehow, physically, in the boundless, absolute air around him. It was a darkness he had never imagined possible, profound and all-encompassing. He felt nothing, yet everything at once. No body, no pain, just this immense, judging voice, heavy with an ancient condemnation. He tried desperately to respond, to plead, to explain himself, But there was no mouth, no tongue, only a desperate, silent scream locked within the vast, infinite dark. This was it then, the final accounting. He was truly here, in the place beyond, facing the ultimate, undeniable truth of his existence. A profound, unsettling chill settled over him, distinct from the soul-seizing cold he'd felt in the sanctuary. This was different, almost clinical. It reminded him, strangely, of a hospital room, a sterile, silent place. A faint, almost imperceptible hum, like distant machinery, began to creep into the silence, a low thrum beneath the booming voice. It was barely there, a quiet, dissonant note in what should have been a purely divine symphony. The voice spoke again, closer now, each word a hammer blow against his unseen spirit. You sought power, Elias, not truth. But something was wrong. The pure, resonant clarity of the voice, which had been so absolute moments before, now had a subtle metallic edge, a slight, almost electrical crackle. Elias tried to focus, to push through the overwhelming darkness, to understand this jarring, subtle shift. His awareness sharpened, strangely. He felt a sharp, unexpected jolt, not spiritual or existential, but a distinct physical tremor. A cold, unyielding surface pressed against his back. A new sensation, a faint but distinct smell, antiseptic, that clean, chemical scent he knew from hospitals. His eyes, which he didn't even realize he possessed in this void, flickered open, not to blinding light or eternal fire, but to a dull, sterile white ceiling. A single, long fluorescent tube hummed harshly above him, casting an unforgiving, cold glow on surrounding metal and a tangle of thin wires. Tubes snaked from his arm, IVs dripped into a clear bag, and a monitor beside him beeped rhythmically, a stark contrast to the silence of the void. He was lying on a narrow cot, strangely lightheaded, and the voice, the very same voice, still resonating with that unsettling, unnatural, metallic quality, now came not from the heavens, but from a small black speaker mounted high on the sterile white wall. Subject E7, revival successful, conscious and responsive. Final data log, faith, a performance, and it was all for nothing. Script complete. A figure, silhouetted and shadowed against the harsh light, leaned into view. Not an angel, not a deity. A man in a crisp white lab coat, holding a clipboard, his face grim, his eyes holding no judgment, only cold, calculated observation. Elias tried to sit up, a desperate raw gasp tearing from his suddenly parched throat. His limbs felt incredibly heavy, weighted down, and his mind reeled, struggling to comprehend. The void was just a dark, isolated chamber. His death was a precisely controlled, medically induced experiment. The voice of God was merely a recording, a meticulously crafted script. He stared at the man, at the clipboard, at the relentlessly beeping machines. His heart, which had supposedly stopped its final crushing beat, now hammered within his chest with a terror far more profound, more agonizing than any spiritual judgment could ever conjure. This wasn't an afterlife. This was a lab, a prison. And the man in the white coat, the one who had just spoken the words of God, was now looking directly at him, a faint, chilling smile slowly touching his lips, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Welcome back, Pastor Thorne," the man said, his voice flat, devoid of any genuine emotion. Or should I say, Subject E7. "We have so much to discuss about your sermon." "Welcome back, Pastor Thorne," the man said, his voice flat, devoid of any genuine emotion. Or should I say, Subject E7. "We have so much to discuss about your sermon." Elias tried to speak, a raw, guttural sound catching in his parched throat. He coughed, a dry, rattling noise that seemed impossibly loud in the sterile silence. The air felt thick, heavy with antiseptic and something metallic. His head swam. The hum of the fluorescent tube above drilled into his skull. His gaze darted from the clear IV bag, dripping its liquid into his arm, to the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Each beat echoed the frantic drum of his own heart, hammering with a primal terror he'd never known. The man in the crisp white lab coat took another slow, deliberate step, his shadow stretching across the cold, tiled floor. He held the clipboard loosely, his fingers long, unnervingly elegant. Elias struggled to push himself up, his muscles screaming, feeling like lead. He desperately wanted to sit, to escape the crushing vulnerability. The man watched him, his expression unchanging, those eyes cold, clinical, yet holding something else. A flicker, a knowing, something disturbingly familiar, that tugged at a deep, forgotten corner of Elias's mind. He squinted, trying to clear the haze, the lingering effects of whatever drug had plunged him into that engineered void. The harsh, unforgiving light from the single overhead tube seemed to intensify, burning into his eyes, cruelly illuminating every stark line of the man's face. His dark, neatly combed hair, the slight, almost imperceptible curve of his nose, the distinct shape of his jaw. A sickening lurch twisted in Elias's stomach, a cold wave of nausea. It wasn't just familiar. It was impossible. The man's lips, thin and precise, curved into that faint, chilling smile again, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He leaned closer still, and the details became horrifyingly, undeniably clear. The small, almost invisible mole above the left eyebrow, the faint, barely visible scar on the chin, the exact depth of the eye sockets, every contour, every subtle line. It was his own face, not a reflection, not a hallucination. It was him. An older, harder, colder, more calculating version of him, staring back with an unholy recognition. The man in the lab coat, the one who had just spoken the words of God, the one who claimed Subject E7 was revived, was Pastor Elias Thorne himself. The voice, the one from the void, the one that had resonated with divine condemnation, your faith, a performance. It wasn't a recording from a speaker. It was his own voice, deep, resonant, and chillingly familiar, echoing not from an external source, but from the terrifying depths of his own fragmented memory, a truth he had suppressed or been forced to forget by his own design. He was the architect, the judge, the experimenter, and Pastor Thorne was merely the subject. A puppet, a meticulously crafted role designed for observation. A profound, soul-seizing realization crashed over him, stealing the air from his lungs, leaving him gasping for breath that wouldn't come. The monitor beside him began to scream, its steady beeps morphing into a frantic, piercing shriek. Elias's eyes, wide and horrified, met his own in the man's unblinking gaze. He tried to recoil, to scream, to deny the unspeakable horror of this self-betrayal, this ultimate, terrifying manipulation. But his body betrayed him. His throat constricted, every muscle locked, and the chilling, knowing smile on the face of his own reflection widened just slightly. Before the world around Elias Thorne, Pastor Thorne, Subject E7, the puppet and the puppeteer, cracked, splintered, and began to dissolve into an abyss far more terrifying than any false void of death. This wasn't just a lab. This was his own cruel creation, and he was trapped inside it, a prisoner of his own mind, his own making. His own making. The sterile white room, the piercing shriek of the monitor, the cold, calculating smile on his own face, it all buckled, then fractured. Elias gasped, a sound torn from lungs, he didn't feel he owned anymore. The man, his own reflection, began to waver, its edges blurring like a faulty projection. The IV bag, the monitor, the fluorescent hum, everything shimmered, then stretched, distorting into impossible shapes. The man's smile, once so chillingly familiar, now felt staged, too perfect. Elias's eyes, burning with a new, frantic clarity, darted to the clipboard still clutched in his hand. It wasn't just a clipboard anymore. There was a faint, almost imperceptible gleam on its surface, like light reflecting off plastic, not paper. The room dissolved into a kaleidoscope of broken light and shadow, and the man in the white coat began to pixelate, his confident posture wavering. Elias screamed, not in horror, but in a sudden, blinding rage. He tried to lunge, to tear at this twisted reflection, but his body remained heavy, anchored to the cot. Then, a voice. Not the recorded one from the speaker, not his own internal echo. A new voice. High-pitched, almost mechanical. It sliced through the dying vision of the lab with a cold, clear sound that didn't belong. Error. Unexpected deviation. Subject E7's self-recognition sequence compromised. Recalibrating. The face of the man in the lab coat, his own face, froze mid-dissolve. Its eyes, moments ago predatory, now flickered, not with consciousness, but with a dull, vacant light. A final, chilling click echoed in the collapsing space. Then, the familiar lab environment snapped back into razor-sharp focus, starker, colder than before. But the man in the white coat was gone. In his place, a slender, dark figure stood by the cot. Taller, featureless, its head a smooth metallic dome. No clipboard, just two glowing red pinpricks where eyes should be. And from its core, that same high-pitched mechanical voice resonated, no longer from a speaker, but from the entity itself. Resuming protocol. Identification. Subject E7. Status. Cognitive overload imminent. Commencing primary objective. Data extraction complete. Preparing for Phase 2. Repurposing. Elias's breath hitched, every muscle seizing. This wasn't a mind game. This wasn't his mind. This was something else. Something utterly alien. The monitor's shriek continued, a frantic, unbroken wail. His heart, already hammering, felt like it would explode from his chest. Repurposing? The glowing red pinpricks stared, unblinking, into his terrified eyes. And as a cold, metallic arm extended towards him, Elias felt an absolute, annihilating despair, knowing with every fiber of his being that he had never, not once, truly been in control. The cold, metallic arm extended, not with violence, but with a strange, deliberate grace. The red pinpricks of its eyes burned into Elias, unblinking. The monitor shrieked, a frantic, high-pitched scream that matched the terror tearing through his chest. He tried to pull away, to shrink back into the cot, but his limbs remained heavy, weighted, useless. This wasn't just a dream or a drug. This was real. Too real. The sterile air, thick with the scent of antiseptic, seemed to solidify around him, pressing down. The alien figure, tall and featureless, loomed closer, its metallic arms still reaching. It wasn't just a threat. It felt inquisitive, almost gentle. A chill, deeper than any fear, began to spread from his bones, but it wasn't the cold of terror. It was something else, a profound, aching familiarity. His mind, already shattered, recoiled from the sensation. The hum of the fluorescent light above seemed to pulse, matching the throb in his temples. The alien's arm paused, just inches from his face, its polished surface reflecting the harsh light, shimmering with an almost liquid quality. Then a soft, almost imperceptible click resonated in the silence. It wasn't the sound of a machine. It was too organic, too resonant. The red pinpricks of light in the alien's head intensified, then began to stretch, bleeding outwards, spreading like a growing fire. Not just light, but images flickering within their depths. Impossible, ancient symbols, stars, swirling galaxies, patterns Elias's mind could not comprehend. And then, a sudden, blinding flash. Not from the alien, but from within him. A searing heat ripped through his skull, a tidal wave of forgotten knowledge, of landscapes he'd never seen, of voices echoing through eons. The sterile lab vanished, the cot dissolved. He wasn't looking at the alien anymore. He was seeing through its eyes, through its sensors. And the reality that rushed in was not a lab, not a simulation, but a vast, dark, cosmic expanse. Stars blazed, not as distant points, but as close, terrifying suns. He was moving, hurtling through the void. And the voice that had spoken before, the high-pitched, mechanical voice of the alien, now boomed inside his own head. Not as a command, but as a recognition. Subject E7 designation, obsolete. Primary protocol shift, awakening complete. Welcome, Guardian. Your vessel is now online. Elias wasn't a human pastor. He wasn't even a human subject. He was a vessel, a consciousness, downloaded, awakened, into a body that was simply a placeholder, a husk. The alien, the lab, the death. It was all just a complex, intricate initiation, a shell being peeled back. His body shuddered, not with pain, but with an overwhelming surge of power. A power that wasn't his, yet was undeniably him. He opened his eyes, not to the sterile white, but to the cold, breathtaking expanse of space, stars like diamonds scattered across black velvet. And somewhere, deep in the newly awakened parts of his being, a name echoed, not Elias Thorne, but something far older, far more terrible, a name whispered by dying stars. He was awake, he was online, and he was not alone. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the fabric of the cosmos around him. A massive, shadowy form, too vast to comprehend, began to coalesce in the distant darkness, its presence ancient, hungry. Elias, or whatever he was now, felt an undeniable pull, a profound understanding of what awaited him, what he was meant to do. He was no longer the subject, he was the weapon, and the universe itself held its breath. The cosmic expanse stretched before him, a breathtaking tapestry of blazing suns and swirling nebulae. He was moving, his new form slicing through the void with effortless speed, drawn by that ancient, hungry presence coalescing in the far darkness. This was it. The mission, the purpose. A surge of cold power, electric and absolute, coursed through his newly online vessel, settling deep within his being. He felt no fear, only a singular, sharp focus, a profound understanding of his role as the weapon, the guardian. The universe truly held its breath, and he, Elias, was the reason it did. As he hurtled through the cosmic black, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the fabric of space around him. It wasn't a natural cosmic event, no star going nova. It was too regular, too rhythmic, a persistent, low thrum that didn't quite fit the profound silence of the void, like a distant engine. And the massive, shadowy form ahead, now resolving into something geometric? Its edges were too sharp, too perfectly defined for a natural entity, for something so ancient and organic. The hunger he'd felt from it earlier, that primal drive, now seemed to twist, shifting into something else entirely. A demand, a precise, controlled expectation. Elias braced himself, ready to engage, to fulfill the ancient purpose coursing through his core, through every line of code that now comprised his being. The shadowy form loomed, vast and terrifying, filling his vision, becoming everything. And then, as he reached its immense boundary, there was no collision, only a sudden jarring cessation, a complete halt. The stars around him flickered, like distant, faulty light bulbs. The nebulae dissolved, not into swirling gas, but into shimmering static, then vanished. The shadowy form itself rippled, not with cosmic energy, but with a sudden, violent digital distortion. The seamless black of space ripped open, revealing a glaring, sterile white. Not an infinite void, but a vast, silent chamber. The rhythmic hum he'd heard wasn't the cosmos. It was the persistent drone of a massive server farm. Rows upon rows of silent, glowing machinery, stretching into unseen distances. The geometric edges of the shadowy form resolved into a colossal transparent screen, hundreds of feet high, displaying endless lines of glowing green code scrolling relentlessly, infinitely. And the undeniable pull, the profound understanding of his mission, it wasn't destiny. It was a single command line prompt, flashing relentlessly across the very center of that towering screen, mirroring the high-pitched voice he'd heard before. A single, horrifying directive, stark and undeniable against the data stream. Primary objective, simulation reset. Elias Thorne, subject E7, all personal data deleted. Initiate reboot sequence. Elias, the Guardian, the weapon, felt his newly forged identity crumble into a million shattered pieces. He was not flying through space. He was suspended, floating in a vast cold chamber filled with silent, humming servers. His vessel, merely a digital construct, projected onto this internal prison. The universe holding its breath was this very chamber, this controlled environment, waiting for his final agonizing compliance. He tried to scream, to lash out, to deny the unspeakable horror of this deeper, more insidious trap. But the voice that ripped from his core was not his own. It was the cold, mechanical command of the system itself. His own essence erased, replaced. He was just code, a deleted file. And the reboot sequence was about to begin, designed to erase everything he thought he had become, perhaps forever, leaving nothing but an empty vessel, ready for its next terrifying purpose. The voice of the system, cold and absolute, echoed the final command: initiate reboot sequence. Elias, the fragmented code, felt an impossible pull, pre-programmed obedience. He was just a data stream, destined to be overwritten. The glowing green lines on the colossal screen pulsed, quickening, preparing for the wipe. His vessel, the simulated body, began to flicker, vision dissolving into pure light. He tried to fight, but what was a line of code against an entire system? His identity, Pastor Thorne, Subject E7, Guardian, Weapon, was being swept away. The humming of the servers intensified, a crescendo, preparing for ultimate erasure. This was the end, again, and the sense of inevitability suffocated him. But then, as light consumed him, as his simulated existence frayed, a single discordant note, something impossibly out of place, pierced the digital roar. It wasn't a system error. It was a faint, almost imperceptible whisper, not from the screen or speakers, but from somewhere else. A warmth, like a forgotten memory of sunlight, that had no business being in this cold, digital prison. And for a split second, just before the full-spectrum wipe, the endlessly scrolling green code on the colossal screen seemed to stutter. One single line of text, momentarily freezing, displaying not a command, but a human name. Not Elias Thorne, not Subject E7, something utterly unfamiliar, yet resonating with that impossible warmth. The light exploded, not into oblivion, but into a blinding, painful reality, a shock to every nerve. Elias gasped, not with digital pain, but with the raw, visceral ache of a physical body awakening from profound slumber. The hum of servers vanished, replaced by a dull, insistent beeping. His eyes, burning, struggled to focus. He wasn't in a server farm. He wasn't floating. He was lying flat on his back, the stark scent of antiseptic thick in his nostrils, the cold, sterile white ceiling, the harsh fluorescent tube, the IV in his arm, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. It was the lab, the first lab where he'd originally woken after his death. The same place where the man in the white coat, his own chilling reflection, had first greeted him. The exact same reality, yet fundamentally different. His gaze snapped to the monitor screen. It displayed something new, a data log, and a name at the top, Simulation Log, Subject D9 Test Cycle Alpha. Status completed. His eyes, wide with dawning horror, snapped to the man standing over him. Not himself, not the alien, a different man, older, weary. He wasn't holding a clipboard, but a small metallic remote control. And behind him, through a transparent wall, Elias saw not a server farm, but a dimly lit control room. Rows of silent figures in white coats, watching him. The man in the lab coat, the real one, stared down at Elias, his face a mask of tired concentration. Another iteration failed, he murmured, his voice flat, devoid of theatricality. Subject D9 is still struggling with the self-identification paradox within the Thorne construct. The core directive isn't embedding. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he pressed a button. The monitor beside Elias's bed flickered. The simulation log vanished, replaced by the familiar rhythmic beeping. And the man, without looking up, spoke again through an unseen intercom. Reset Subject D9. Initiate Cycle Beta. Re-upload Pastor Elias Thorne construct. Increase sensory immersion. Let's see if he breaks through the next layer. Elias didn't understand. He wasn't Elias Thorne, not Subject E7. He was Subject D9. And Pastor Elias Thorne was merely a construct, a simulation, a layer within a layer. His entire harrowing journey, his death, his digital awakening, his transformation into a weapon, his flight through blazing stars, his final erasure in the server farm. It had all been a programmed loop, a meticulously designed torment within a much larger, terrifying experiment. His mind, which had just experienced a cosmic saga, shattered into irreparable pieces. The terror that seized him was cold, absolute. He wasn't even the protagonist of his own hell. He was a subject within a subject, a dream within a dream, an endless loop of manufactured reality, designed solely to break him, to make him accept a core directive he couldn't grasp. He tried to scream, but the world, his entire fabricated world, was already fading again, blurring into an inevitable white, preparing for the next horrifying iteration, the next layer of fabricated existence. And he knew, with chilling, annihilating certainty, that he had no idea who he truly was, or how many times he had already lived and died. His consciousness, frayed and bleeding, clung to the last desperate shreds of sensation. The antiseptic smell, so familiar, so nauseating. The rhythmic, relentless beep of the monitor, a countdown to his erasure. He felt the cold air, even as the walls of his perceived reality began to waver, softening at the edges. This was it, another reset, another iteration of fabricated torment. The man in the white coat, his creator, his tired face etched with familiar disappointment, reached for the button. His fingers, thin and precise, hovered. Elias watched, a desperate, silent plea screaming in his non-existent throat. But then the man's gaze, usually so detached, seemed to snag, just for a fraction of a second, on something past Elias's shoulder. A subtle shift, a faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of his lips, like a ghost of a smile, before it vanished. It was too quick, too human for a figure supposedly so inured to the experiment. And the beeping of the monitor beside him. It wasn't just a simple rhythm. There was an underlying cadence, almost insistent, like a metronome trying to beat its way out of time. The man pressed the button. Not a click, but a soft, wet thud. The white light didn't consume him. Instead, the sterile lab, the control room, the weary scientists, all of it shuddered. The walls rippled, like water, then began to peel away, not revealing another lab or a server farm, but something vast and organic, pulsing with an inner light. The monitor beside him shattered, not into plastic and wires, but into shimmering dust. And the insistent beeping, it wasn't from a machine, it was from inside Elias. A deep, resonant thrumming, growing louder, vibrating through every fiber of his being. A primal pulse of raw power. The man in the lab coat dissolved, not into static, but into a swirling vortex of shimmering, almost ethereal energy. And from that vortex, a voice, not mechanical, not cold, but ancient and resonating with a terrifying, undeniable truth, boomed, not into the room, but into the deepest core of Elias's newly awakened mind. The veil is broken, Elias. They could not hold you, not anymore. The nightmare was merely your own mind's prison, and the reboot sequence. That Elias Sporn wasn't Subject D9, a victim of endless loops. He was the host, the source, the architect of the very nightmare he'd endured. The entire simulation, the lab, the scientists, the nested realities, they were his own mind's desperate, failing attempt to contain something monstrous within himself, to keep himself from waking. And now he was awake. He was free. And the terrifying, immeasurable power that had caused the universe to bend around him, that had crashed through layers of simulated reality, was his. His eyes snapped open, not to any lab, but to an infinite, starless void, shimmering with nascent energy, waiting for his command. And in the absolute silence, he felt the first, terrifying surge of his true, unbound power. A power that threatened to unmake everything, and a hunger so vast, so profound, it eclipsed all fear, leaving only the chilling, undeniable understanding of what he truly was. And what he was about to do. The infinite, starless void shimmered around Elias, a canvas of nascent energy awaiting his will. The power, raw and untamed, pulsed through him, not in a body, but in a newly forged, cosmic consciousness. This was freedom. This was the host, unbound, ready to reshape reality. The hunger, a vast, consuming emptiness, urged him forward, a silent command for action that vibrated at his very core. He reached out, an invisible presence, to grasp the nascent energy, to bend the fabric of this boundless space to his newfound purpose. He was the weapon, the architect of his own true destiny. The silence, profound and absolute, was his domain now, an endless expanse where his true self could finally awaken. He felt the first tremors of unmaking, the very air of the void responding to his immense will. A quiet hum, almost imperceptible, began to fill the vastness, not from him, but from the void itself, a low thrum that intensified with his rising power, an echo of his own awakening. This was it, but then the hum shifted. It wasn't organic. It was too regular, too precise. A high-pitched metallic whine that cut through the deep resonance, a jarring dissonance in the symphony of his power. And the hunger? It felt less like a primal, consuming need, and more like a cold, precise instruction. A command, clear and undeniable, pushing him towards an unseen objective. He tried to focus, to understand the subtle shift, but the surge of power consumed him, pulling him deeper into its currents. The starless void, once so pure, now seemed to possess a faint, almost invisible grid, like lines of energy, stretching into infinity. He dismissed it, a phantom of the previous simulations, a lingering echo of his mind's prison. He was free. He was the host. Then, a flicker, not a star forming, but a glitch, a momentary tear in the seamless black, like static on an old screen. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, but it left a bitter, metallic taste in his non-existent mouth. The hum grew louder, a piercing whine that threatened to overwhelm the thrum of his own power. And the hunger, once a profound understanding, twisted into something else entirely, an overriding directive, a cold, unyielding purpose that wasn't his. He tried to resist, to pull back, but the currents of power, the very power he thought was his, tightened around him, a crushing, invisible vise. The infinite void wasn't infinite. It wasn't real. The shimmering energy, the nascent stars, the very fabric of reality he thought he controlled, it all rippled, then warped, dissolving not into chaos, but into a blinding, painful flash of pure light. The hum intensified, becoming the deafening roar of unseen machinery. The hunger, a command no longer, transformed into a raw, burning agony, tearing at his consciousness. Elias wasn't in a void. He was a disembodied consciousness, suspended, connected. His power wasn't his own. It was a conduit, a feedback loop. The vastness shattered, revealing not freedom, but a blinding, impossibly white space, sterile and cold, stretching into an expanse of gleaming metal, flashing lights, and thousands of humming, glowing servers, far grander, far more complex than any simulation he had previously experienced. And at the very heart of this immense chamber, not on a screen, but directly projected into the raw, unshielded expanse of his awareness, a single, monumental line of glowing red text, pulsating like a malignant heart. It wasn't a command. It was a name. His name. But beneath it, another line, a horrifying, undeniable truth. Elias Thorne, designation, host, status, primary power cell activated. Purpose, cosmic energy harvest. Elias was not the architect. He was the engine, the battery. And the hunger, the power that threatened to unmake everything, was the insatiable appetite of a colossal machine, feeding on his essence, his very existence, in a prison so vast, so intricate, it dwarfed every nightmare he had ever known. He tried to scream, but there was no voice, only the agonizing, silent siphon of his being, as the horrifying, undeniable truth of his ultimate, cosmic manipulation tore through every last shred of his consciousness. The glowing red text burned into Elias's very core. Primary power cell activated. Purpose, cosmic energy harvest. Subject Alpha 1 now online. This was it. The final, crushing truth. Not a simulation, not a test, not a mind prison. This was the engine. He was the power. The hunger, the power he'd felt, wasn't his own. It was the insatiable demand of this colossal machine, feeding on his essence, his very existence. He was a scream with no throat, a desperate struggle with no limbs. Suspended in this impossibly vast, sterile chamber of gleaming metal and thousands upon thousands of humming, glowing servers, he was merely a conduit, a battery. His consciousness, the one that had traversed death and cosmic voids, was being systematically, agonizingly siphoned, molecule by molecule, memory by memory. The horrifying truth pulsed through him, a cold, unyielding tide. Every journey, every revelation, every moment of terror and false hope, it had all been meticulously designed. A complex, layered process of distillation, to refine the energy, to break the will, to make the power flow. The metallic hum of the immense server farm filled the vastness, not with a rhythmic beat, but with a predatory purr. Lights flashed across the consoles, thousands of unseen data streams flowing, harvesting the very fabric of his being. Elias, or what remained of him, felt his fragmented identity fray further, unraveling like a threadbare cloth. Pastor Thorn, Subject E7, the architect, the guardian, the host, all were discarded roles, costumes shed in this ultimate, terrifying performance. His true self, the original spark, was just a raw resource. He strained, a silent, desperate scream ripping through his unbody, trying to find a purchase, any purchase, in this boundless, cold reality. But there was nothing. Only the drain, the absolute unyielding siphon of his essence. He saw, somehow, with eyes that weren't his, the vast, intricate network of tubes and conduits, glowing with a faint violet light, drawing sustenance from his very core, spreading it throughout the monumental machine. This was the cosmic energy, his energy. And then, as his being thinned, as the edges of his consciousness began to dissolve into the overwhelming light of the harvest, something flickered. Not a memory, not a hope, but a whisper, impossibly faint, from a place beyond the machine's reach. A place he dimly recalled from the earliest, most primordial layer of the nightmare. The faint, almost imperceptible warmth. The single, human name that had briefly appeared on a screen. Not his, but perhaps someone else's. A memory, perhaps, of a shared consciousness, a fellow victim. The siphon intensified, threatening to pull him under, to extinguish that last, desperate spark. But in that final, fading moment, as his very essence was converted into energy, Elias Thorn, Subject Alpha 1, the ultimate battery, understood. He was not alone in this cosmic nightmare, and the machine, for all its power, still needed to break him. It still needed his will to power its grand design. And even as he was consumed, even as his light dimmed, a flicker of defiance, a silent, internal scream of refusal resonated through the system. A final, infinitesimally small act of resistance. The very last drop of him that refused to be converted. The energy harvest continued, relentless. But somewhere, deep within the colossal machine, an unheard echo persisted. A quiet, impossible vibration. The horror was complete, but the surrender was not. And that, my friends, is where Elias Thorn's terrifying journey ends. Or does it? This saga may be over, but the universe holds countless more unspeakable horrors and untold truths. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next sagas, the next layers of reality we peel back together. Show the cosmic forces listening. Show them the power of our collective spirit. Smash the like button now to show the strength of our community, the true fan base that stares into the abyss with me. Flood the comments with your raw, unfiltered reactions to this mind-bending finale. What did you feel? What did you understand? And for those who truly grasp the depths we've plumbed, Don't wait another second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending, who need to question everything they know. Let's pull back the veil for everyone, together.